The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Good afternoon and welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowsky, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on Reality Radio 101. So get ready to talk and email us a message. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowsky.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad to be with you here today again. We are here at the Bear Psychology Radio Show, and I have found that the most profound changes occur when a person truly feels heard and understood. I like to think of it as deeply bearing witness to life evolving. We can feel incredibly stuck when we live with our fears, stresses, and troubles alone, but when we share, we dialogue, and we feel supported, it provides a powerful foundation for us to move forward in understanding and care. Isn't it time for your evolution? We are very happy to talk to you today about our topic, which is really about kindness and gratitude. And because we have the holidays coming up, easing the strain of this upcoming season within this unbelievably demanding year, 2020 pandemic. So we're lucky today. We have Dr. John King, and John has actually been with us before a couple of years ago to talk about his book, hashtag Deal With It. And it's really about PTSD, living well with PTSD. And he has a lot of his own life experiences in the book, as well as suggestions of, how to deal with life when you have massive trauma, especially when you have massive trauma that just comes spiking up seemingly from nowhere. And, you're left dealing with it while you watch your life crumbling. And so, the thing that becomes really remarkable is how do you then pour kindness, appreciation, and gratitude into a life that is really falling apart. It takes a little bit of grace and insight and capacity to really face things that are quite frightening. So I want to start by thanking you, Dr. John King, for joining us again and sharing with us.
Well, thank you. Wonderful to be with you. Thank you very much for having me back. That's
great. I'm so glad you're here, and we'll look forward to hear a little bit about what's happening with your work and your foundation, Next Foundation, which you can remind our listeners about. And of course, if anybody's interested in John's book, it can be found actually on his website at drjohnaking.com. And of course, we'll add that to the links as well when all of this is posted through social media. So today, what I really want to do is take a little bit of time and, really lean into this idea of gratitude, especially, when we think about gratitude, people have had a hard year. And, sometimes gratitude isn't something that comes easily when things are really tough. And I know that you've lived through some very tough times yourself, John. So maybe you can kind of start with, where did you get your ability to gracefully face what was happening in your life?
Sure, thank you. Well, it has been a tough year. I'll just give you a small recap of ours. Got hired on for a very prestigious job, reported a sexual harassment issue, was fired from that job, lost a friend who was murdered under suspicious circumstances. As a result of all that stress, had a heart attack, had a detached retina, and then I just got out of ICU about 4 weeks ago with a near-death experience because of blood clots caused by COVID. So I had COVID back in January. So it's very interesting that you started today talking about that, because this morning I was reflecting on how wonderful my year had been. And in the midst of what, I'm married to a beautiful woman. She loves me. I've got a roof. I've got food. I've got 2 dogs that don't speak English, so they don't understand if I cuss. And I think gratitude's an attitude, and we hear that as a platitude. Yeah, there's far too many oods, but it really is a way to look at life. And there's no point bemoaning a situation. We should find situations difficult. We should find them a challenge. We should find that we have to come to terms and accept some things. But I think part of it is the whole mantra of turning poo into fertilizer. Is like, whatever is yesterday's waste will be tomorrow's promise. And that is purely decisional. That's not based on genes or education or how well you've got it or how tough you've got it. That is just a hardcore emotional and mental decision. And it's a discipline to make that decision day after day, regardless of what's thrown or come your way.
Well, that is quite the introduction, John. I did not actually realize that when we started our conversation about you joining us, that you had quite this year.
Yes,
and you were very discreet in our back and forth, our initial conversation about you joining again this year. So I didn't see this coming. But it's absolutely, this is grace. I really think it's interesting how, sometimes things come together and you don't know what you're going to be presented with. Life kind of demands a certain kind of openness. And I think one of the tendencies is that we can become very rigid when we've experienced trauma and just not allow ourselves to be open or to create a proper landing field for grace to come to the surface. And you coming today on the show is like that. It's like a little grace, because it's such a genuine example of grace. Here you are telling me about all these things. I mean, they're heart-wrenching things. And then, your health and everything you must have faced. I'm sure it was frightening at times. And yet, I hear it in your voice, the willingness for this to be sitting in an okay place for you.
Yeah.
So that's just beautiful.
Well, thank you. This too shall pass.
Yes.
And it's like grace is, by definition, is unmerited favor. I look at my life every day as a gift, and I always have. I've never asked why what was done to me as a child when I was trafficked, why I had to go through that. I've always asked that it would turn around for good. And I think that's what I had a very interesting encounter in the hospital that might help some people when faced with stressful times. So here I am, I'm going in there, and I was abused as a child, I was trafficked, all that sort of stuff. So touch is difficult. Being around people I don't know is very traumatic. So all of these events, we would say, would be triggering, especially when you have to remove your clothes. You've got all that stuff going on. It's very vulnerable. And so when faced with that situation, it's either I'm going to either walk in humility or be humiliated. I'm either going to embrace this thing and wear my my condition, my issues as medals of honor or their scars for life. So what I did is I talked to the ER person from the very first person. It's like, my name's John King. I have post-traumatic stress as a result of childhood sexual abuse. I have a challenge in the following areas and I need your help. And at that point, I've owned my stuff, but I'm not doing it in a way that I'm a victim. I'm doing it as to invite someone into my space and to make this something that we can do together. And through the entire process of, I was in ICU for 7 days and all that sort of stuff, there was only one incident where it was a little bit of a challenge. Everything else, every doctor, they moved protocols, they did a range of different things to be accommodating and understanding. And I've done that a couple of times in very severe situations. And so to your point, Anna, about how do people respond in times with trauma, I think we have got so much control in terms of what our response is. And I think catch cries like triggered and all that sort of stuff, they don't add to the conversation. We mentioned a little bit of this before we got on air. They don't add to the ability to be able to have a conversation about what is going on. And that's so powerful. Your opening statement was so powerful about how having those conversations can literally, poke bubbles in these building episodes that happen in people's lives.
Mm-hmm. As you're talking, I'm thinking a lot about how release and letting go, acceptance plays into all of this. The ability to face our ever-present moment, this one, like the one we're in, and then the one we're in right now, like being fully in this moment. Yeah. And, when we are fully in this moment, the one that we're facing, like you were describing about your hospital moment, owning that realization that your safety demanded of you to speak clearly of what was true for you, what you recognized. You needed other people to see you. Yeah. And so you allowed that to happen. Like, I just think that it's a really beautiful thing. And when I hear my clients start to do that, John, when people start to tell me, I've started to say, I started to tell people, I started to tell the people who I love, that I'm suffering. I started to tell my friends. I told my healthcare providers. They notice that people respond to them in a different way, in a more accepting way. So where is that accepting? It's coming from, well, clearly in your case, it was coming from you first.
Yes.
And when I hear my clients do it, it always sounds to me like the acceptance is first coming from themselves, this declaration of, this is who I am. I might not like it even, but it is the truth. And it opens doors. So it's quite a remarkable thing.
Yeah, that's a very powerful statement, Anna. It's true. You've got to own it. It has to be yours. They're no longer scars of shame. They're medals of honor. This is who my life is. This is who I am. And I'm not going to make any excuses for that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's good to know who you are. I mean, I had written in the blog for this show that I had put up a tent in my backyard. It's huge. It's a full-on canvas wall tent, 12 by 14, and it's sitting on a platform so that, like, it's pretty cold here right now. There's snow everywhere, and I could walk into that tent, turn on the heater, and sit in some comfortable chairs in a socially distanced background, of comfort. Even though I'm outside, I can sit with people safely during COVID because, we've got lots of different distance between us and a open air kind of structure. Like it's quite breezy, but it's also nice and warm because it's got blankets and pillows and things like that in it. So it's like, this is the moment that we're living in. We are living in a really strange moment. So, this idea that we can be grateful and adapt to this moment, the one we're living, becomes really important. Not waiting for things to change, but engaging ourselves fully in the unfolding of our life even within this strange moment. So, I mean, I did that because I know myself well enough that, you know, being able to do things the right way and live safely, and yet also have ways to connect with people over the next few months before we all get our vaccines. And while we're still in lockdown here in Toronto, but as we lift the restrictions, you know, these outdoor meetings can be a possibility, but only because I've accepted the fact that I know myself well enough that I needed to create something. I know myself well enough that people are super important to me, and just going with isolation, you know, when I can do something about it, it doesn't make sense. So, you know, this is just a really important thing for all of us to recognize, that we can take ownership of what's happening right now, know yourself well enough to understand what are your priorities and how do you want to live your life in this very moment. We just got a email, and I want to read it to you, John. You'll love this. It says, "Hello, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to you. I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. King for his book." This is from Denise, I think. Yeah. A friend of mine purchased it and gave it to me, and it really helped. By the way, what accent does Dr. King have? Thank you.
That's wonderful. I remember sending it out to Denise. It's Australian, love. I'm an Australian.
There you go.
Second fleet convict, with a whole bunch of black fella in there, because that's who we married when we were down there as convicts. Yeah, that's right. There's this really interesting history in Australia. I just did 23andMe, which is, I'm not doing a plug for 23andMe. I really literally did this. It just came in a couple of days ago, and it's like it's a way of getting your details about your own genetic history and material, and it's super interesting. Have you ever done that? No, I haven't.
So you might find that you have an interesting history, because it may be very mixed and varied, given that you come from Australia, right? I know you're living in the US now, but your history is Australian, born in Australia.
Yes, correct. Yeah. You made an interesting statement about knowing yourself. I think, and I talk about this in Deal With It, is that there was a difference with John 1.0 and John 2.0. And I was accepting to a degree of John 1.0 prior to the recall of what happened as a kid. But after the recall and after the trauma that it initiated, I didn't have a choice to maybe come to terms and maybe like myself. I had to learn to totally love and embrace this new person, because he didn't like the same things that John 1.0 did. He was good at a whole range of different things, some things that John 1.0 wasn't good at, and he couldn't do some of the things that John 1.0 could do. So it wasn't until I think my healing really started is when I just gave up on the old me, to a sense, and said, okay, I've changed because of trauma. It's had an impact on my brain. It's an impact on my way to view the world. I'm just going to embrace me and come to terms with me. And I think that was one of the most liberating decisions of my life. Mm-hmm. With all the shortfalls and all the things, just like you were talking about. The ability
you don't have to be limited by some version of yourself that you may have cobbled together because it helps keep you alive.
Yeah, good term. I was, you were talking about mindfulness and being aware in the moment. I've always had such a problem with that up until just recently. And I was thinking about the nature of thoughts, which is a mouthful to say. And thoughts are very, very powerful, but they're nothing at the same time. And I was reflecting on a thought is only as powerful as the emotion we attach to it and the weight that we give it. So if I'm sitting here having a thought about something, dwelling on something, getting emotional about it, getting upset about it, the moment I dismiss that thought, I recognize that it's there, but I recognize that it's just a thought. The moment I dismiss it, I also dismiss the emotion that goes with it. And that allows me to be more present. And I think what we're seeing is we're in a time where people are spending a lot of emotional energy being concerned about things they can't control. Now, I can control my breath in and my breath out, but I can't control anything else. And I think our ability to be able to do that, regardless of where we are on this journey, is to just be able to silo, not necessarily silo emotions, but be aware of what the impinging ones can do to us. And I
You
think,
know,
yep,
what you're saying is amazing, John, because I think you're really tapping into the recognition that, you know, we have this emotional body and we can experience raw emotions that land fully within inside of ourselves and need attention and healing. But when we're able to say yes, and all these thoughts that are creating this cycle of pain and suffering attached to old stories, current worries, future fears, they are separate from the body pain that I'm experiencing right now. Like what I notice with emotional pain is that we can get triggered, it can live in our body, but if we're able to just kind of really attend with our breath, with spaciousness, with kindness towards ourselves, and then recognize that the stories don't need to be generating more pain and suffering in that moment. If we could really lean into the place where the pain lives, we can do an amazing kindness towards ourselves, because we're really actually learning how to, you know, breathe with inside of our body and not generate more trouble. Because, you know, the reality about the pain of thoughts is that, you know, a lot of it becomes self-generated. You know, it's not, you know,
yes,
that you know, kid who was bullying you when you were 12 that's, you know, right in front of you right now. It's you, it's
yes,
me.
yeah,
I'm the one doing it to myself. So
yeah,
then it becomes really important to kind of really notice, wow, look at how pain lives inside of us.
yeah,
And then actually attend to that. So now I'm going back to what you said about breathing and recognizing the breath. I think one of the things that make recognizing, staying with your breath and being mindful, I think what makes that very difficult for most of us is this place where we can feel our emotional pain, and we haven't yet come to a place where we're going to accept it fully without giving it a lot of stories.
yeah. And I think what I've learned is that the the accepting of it is easier than I thought previously. And I don't have to give it weight to accept it. Like I could be sitting somewhere and find myself getting worked up about something. You know, coming into Christmas is very difficult because of a range of things that happened as a child. But I can either sit there and dwell on this, or I can just simply say grief. And I identify the nature of the thought grief. And I just let it
Mm,
go. Because I've identified it, I've given it a name. It now has no hold over what I'm presently doing, which would be giving with my family or having a conversation with you. I just let it go, grief, you know, or judgment, condemnation, you know, fear, rejection. And once I identify it for what it is, I call it by the name associated, just very calmly. It takes all the sting out of it. And once it starts to, because it floats into my mind, and once we get it in our mind, we think we're caged there. But what I've found is if I allow it to float in and then allow it to float out, it just floats out. It can float in. I could get really worked up, but the moment I recognize, man, this is happening in my head, grief, it just floats out. It loses all its power. It's the most amazing thing.
I love that. And you know what that speaks to is the shadow. So if we have certain emotions that we have rejected fully and we don't want to integrate, or on some level we're too frightened of them,
Mm-hmm.
then in our pressure to reject them or to suppress them, we create this kind of pressure cooker of real pain and suffering within inside of ourselves. I think that's really beautiful. Just, you know, using your word, grief. It's like, here it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Just owning it and being okay with it. I've got another email and I want to read it to you. This is so sweet. I think people really see you, John. I think people really, I mean, because just hearing you speak today, it just is so powerful. Here, from George. Dr. King, you are my hero. Oh my God, I can't believe all the adversity that you've gone through this year. Wow, what a year. Thank you for your positive thoughts and comments. You just helped my life today.
That's nice, isn't it? Really nice.
It is. It's really, really nice.
Very worth it. I think, like, let's unpack just a little bit the anger issue, because I get it. Okay, so, for those that don't know, I was sexually abused from 4 to 16 by my mother and her friends. I was trafficked. That's what we'd call it today. Trafficked for a lot of years. And I had recall of the events when I was 45, and my life imploded, total cluster, destroyed it. I went from traveling the world, 120,000 air miles a year, making a bunch of money, to totally catatonic, couldn't get in an elevator, couldn't get on the freeway. So I can get very angry about not what was done by me, but what was done to me, and the fact that it destroyed a marriage, destroyed my relationship with my kids, my career, my ability to make money, all that stuff. And legitimately so, to a degree. But it does me no good, is the decision I came to. So when I talk about owning the anger, it's still there. Like, if I dwell on that stuff, I get really angry and really pissed off. And I get really angry and pissed off at all the people involved. But it does me no good. My blood pressure goes up. So when I embrace it, when I feel it coming up, and it's going to come up a lot in the next week or so, I feel it come up, I just identify it. That's just anger. I'm not processing any emotions. I'm not giving my time to dwell on it, because I've done all that for years. I've unpacked it. I've looked at it. I've come to terms with it. This is, as you said, the shadows of the echoes. Now, can I reconcile being anally raped by my mother with a green plastic soldier because I didn't put my toys away? I can't reconcile that. So there's nowhere for me to file that as far as, happy childhood experience. But what I can do is I can look at it and go, okay, sad, unfortunate. So by labeling that, it takes the sting out of that event, classifies it as something that I can label and file, and it just drifts back into its file drawer. Mm-hmm. And I found that very helpful.
Yeah, it doesn't have to represent who you are as a human being at this moment. That you could be the gracious, remarkable Dr. John King, even when you have a history like this. And I think that's really important to recognize that, it doesn't matter who you are, what your title is, or any of these things. It's just irrelevant. We live in a world where life is very messy, where people who shouldn't have children, and people get injured.
Yeah.
And, it's not representative of you as a human being. And, I really want to acknowledge that. I just think that, your ability to get to this place where you see yourself as the person who you are, like John 2.0. Is that what you said?
Yeah, John 2.0.
I love that. Right. And, I have another one here today. I want to read this as well. This one's from Irene. Hello, Dr. Anna. Thank you very much for this show today. Boy, does the world need some positivity right now, and Dr. King is it. I'm hoping that he's doing well with his 2020 issues. Thank you for being so positive. Merry Christmas and God bless you. Well, we all need blessings, don't we? Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Irene.
So interesting, Anna, is that everything that I've been through this year, the hardest thing happened last week. Yeah. I went to a doctor. I needed to see a doctor about something, and I went in there, and they found out that I had PTSD, and they refused to see me. They refused to give me medical care because I had post-traumatic stress disorder. I know, violates everything in federal law in the US. But this person was just so fearful of, I'm 6 foot, 220 pounds, physically fit, and she somehow thought I was going to pull out a gun and go postal. She'd already came to a whole range of conclusions about how I was going to respond. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really difficult for me to handle. And it comes to your statement, and I love it. I haven't heard anyone, I've used it myself, but I haven't heard anyone else. It's the need to be heard, the need to be seen. I wrote a piece of poetry once, and it just simply said, I scream because I need to be seen. And I think so much of our over vocalization and our very harsh response is we feel like we're drowning and everyone just speaks Mandarin and we're yelling in English, and the louder we yell, we just want attention. And it's because we're not seen. And I think that's an incredibly powerful statement you made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And, the part that I think is really remarkable is somehow I know that you handled it with grace. You didn't scream, and you somehow found a way to navigate that. And that's what I want to know about.
Well,
what did you draw from in that moment?
To be honest, I wasn't handling it well. I had my wife with me. So if I'm put in a small room with strangers, because of what I went through as a kid, I find it extremely difficult. And I was trying to just explain to them that I'm finding this a little bit challenging. And, can my wife please just sit with me in the room and all that sort of stuff? And it wasn't a problem. They asked why. I said, I've got post-traumatic stress, and again, the humiliation or humility. So I went that track. And so she came and sat with me. But as soon as the doctor found out why she was there, she refused to see it. And Melissa stepped up because I was mortified, not just for me. See, I'm resilient. I'll bounce back, but I'm mortified for all the other people who may go out and commit suicide. They may go out and not have the resilience that I've got, or the privilege of being able to learn the lessons that I've had. And I was mortified for those folks. And my wife tapped me out. She leaned over and she just tapped me on the knee and said, baby, why don't you go and take a seat outside and I'll take care of this for us. And she took care of it. Now, she's from South Carolina, so when she gets angry, she gets slow and southern. And she gets very, there you go, dear, all that sort of stuff. And I didn't have the grace for it, but my wife had the grace for me. And I think coming into Christmas, it's probably okay to realize that there's going to be some things that you're going to be good with and some things you're not. And to develop a plan, plan B, because plan A never works out. Have a plan B. And Melissa is my plan B. If things are, and in this case, she was there. She's a tremendous gift. And I think coming into this holiday time, to be able to have a plan B with dealing with family and friends situations I've always found a helpful tool.
Yeah, I mean, when you describe this story, your ability to allow her to say, let me handle this, and you stepped away.
Yeah.
That there is something about that, John. There's something about that is really beautiful.
Yeah, you're right. That really is where the power was with that. And I think that comes out of, having the sort of relationship I'm blessed with having with Mel, but the openness and vulnerability and her ability to be able to see and hear my voice start to rise because I'm not being seen. I'm not being seen. I'm no longer a person. I'm now just an illness. And I was obviously getting vocally louder, and that's when she tapped me out. So her being aware and having a partner who is aware and doesn't see me broken, but sees me as better. I think that's very powerful.
That's a beautiful story. And I'm so glad that you have her in your life. I mean, it's really something when we find people who know us well enough and we trust them well enough to step away from our own pain and just trust, right?
Yep, just said so well, just to be able to trust.
Yeah, which isn't always easy, but boy, does it ever kind of shift us into a new place. I don't know if you're familiar with Brother David Steindl-Rast's work. He's an Interfaith Monk. He did a really beautiful TED Talk, and, he talks a lot about, grace and being grateful. And this is to quote Steindl-Rast. He says, we all know people who've had lots of misfortune that we ourselves would not want to have. And they are deeply happy. They radiate happiness because they're grateful. But Steindl-Rast goes on to say, it is not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us happy. And he goes on, you know, in this incredible TED talk to kind of unpackage, you know, what gratefulness is and how it works. And, you know, he explains that when something, you know, when somebody is completely and truly giving to you, like your wife was, let's say, you know, she's not going to get anything out of it. You know, she's just doing it because she truly wants to, from the fullness of her heart, to give to you. That's the beginning of gratitude.
Yeah, it is. It very much is. In deal with it, I was when I was doing some research and trying to work out who I was and all that, I was having a look at the nature of happiness and how like 66 or 70% of Americans are unhappy. And I thought of Eeyore, and I thought of my own life too, because, you know, if I break it down, I just sit down and tell someone, it's like, man, no, that sounds miserable. I'd hate to be me, sort of thing, you know. And so for me, it became about who I am, who I become, and then my circumstances. And what I figured out is that if I'm 50% happy with who I am, and I'm 40% happy with who I'm becoming, then happiness comes down to 10% of circumstances. So the impact of the rest of the world on me is really only 10%. They can't hurt me any more than that. If I've come to terms with John 2.0, if I'm working very diligently at him being the best him he can, then really, like you said, I'm just grateful for me. I'm grateful for living. I'm grateful that I woke up and I had breakfast when there's so many that didn't. I'm just grateful for that, silly things like that, little things. They become my focus instead of the fact that, you know, I've had the year I've had and it's been horrendous.
No kidding. Wow. It sounds like it's been more than just a little bit demanding. I want to talk a little bit about a tool that people can use that can help with reinforcing this idea of gratefulness and, you know, bringing it into your life in a very practical way. And one of the ways to do this is actually using a gratitude journal. And I'm going to reference again the work of Steindl-Rast and the website gratefulness.org. Because they do a very good job of giving tools on this website. And one of the tools that they have is a gratitude journal. And, you know, they make some really, really beautiful recommendations. You know, like, I like the idea of a gratitude journal. It doesn't have to be something complex, but if you've got a book and you keep it by your bed and you either start your morning with writing a few words, or you end your day by writing a few words, or do both, where, you know, you're capturing what it is you're grateful for, but not just going through the motions, but really, really seeing the moments that represent gratitude for you, and really kind of taking the time, like the way you were describing the moment with your wife. You know, it sounded like you appreciated her so much in your life that you're so grateful for her presence. Like the way in which you describe that moment and how she shows up for you, you know, that's an example of, you know, really, if you're going to write a gratitude journal, like really go into it, go into the detail, go into the feeling, go into that moment, and really become very, very direct about who you're grateful for, what you're grateful for. So it becomes, you know, something that you can actually live again. Like, I don't know if you had this experience, John, but as you were talking, I got a very warm feeling about that moment and how the exchange must have been when she told you she was going to take care of this situation, what that must have felt like for you.
Yeah, and you know, I'm blessed to have had so many of those moments with her in the last 5 years. And it's interesting. I don't use the Grateful Journal, but Melissa does. She does something like that herself, which is wonderful. And I think that's very important. And I think it'll be a great tool for people, because if you think of what most people spend their life preoccupied with, are the things they're not grateful for, the things they regret, the things that they wish never happened. And they take up so much of our time. And coming back to the concept of being able to label them and move them on, then they come out. It's like you're clearing the surface, you're getting rid of the rubble or the dross, so you can get down to the gold and actually see what's there. And when all this other stuff is floating around in our heads and our spirits, in our relationships, that are just the dross of ungratefulness. I'm very grateful for my childhood. I'm very grateful for being sexually abused and trafficked. I know that'll sound odd to people and they'll think I'm crazy, but it's made me who I am today. And I like me. I just like me, because this John 2.0 has helped an incredible amount of people. Now, I would not be here if it wasn't for that. Now, do I wish that upon anyone? No. But I'm really at peace with it. And I think we can come to peace with it. That doesn't take away the sting of it or the pain of the memories or the fact that I still had to deal with something last week related to it, but it slants the whole conversation and looking at life a little differently.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you can recognize that it may not have looked like a gift, but it laid the foundation for who you are today, this John 2.0. This one is from Michelle, and she says she loves John. Well, she says 1.0, but I think she meant 2.0. Brilliant. I'm going to use that for me. Thank you. So I think people are really relating to this. It makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people have had turning points in their life where they realize they can let go of certain things if they will only let themselves have the freedom of that. This one is from Joan, and she says, after hearing Mr. King's troubles, mine are so insignificant. Thank you for discussing. May God bless you. Love your profile online with the pipe. Very sophisticated. I think we had a comment about that the last time too, John. I think somebody wanted to send you some tobacco.
Please. I'd love to get some tobacco. Come on. I need a good tobacco and a good Canadian pipe. That's what I need.
Oh, okay. This one is from Scott, and he says, hello, where can I get Dr. King's book? Do you want to talk a little bit about your book? And you know what? I remember a passage when I read it about you getting, I think it was a CAT scan.
Uh-huh.
That was a turning point for you. Do you want to talk about that, and also where you can get the book, and what your inspiration was for writing it?
Sure. You go to drjohnaking.com, and the books there that deal with it is the name of the book that deals with the recovery. There's another book there called No Working Title, A Life in Process, which was my first book. It's a collection of poetry about the impact of sexual abuse and trafficking. It's not safe for work, but you don't want to leave that around for the grandkids on the coffee table. It'll traumatize those little buggers. So I was at a medical conference, and there's some new technology, which was portable brain scanning stuff. And I was sitting around, and they said, any volunteers? And I volunteers, and they put this thing on my head, it's like a sieve, and we'll see kangaroos hopping around the top paddock and blah, blah, blah. So I did a little test, and we went on and had the rest of the meeting. And the test results, literally on this computer, ding. And the doctor was looking at this report on the screen, and he leaned over and says, I need to have a conversation with you urgently. So, okay, sure. And the whole room goes quiet. They were all expecting to laugh about the kangaroos. So he took me outside, and he said, when did you serve in the military? I said, I never have, sir. He said, well, no, that's not true. I said, well, okay. I can only tell you. I said, no, what I'm seeing here is trauma to the brain of such an extent as some of the worst cases of post-traumatic stress that we've seen in veterans. So, okay. So what about professional sports? I said, well, I boxed and played rugby. He said, no, I'm talking about an incredible level of TBI. And I said, well, He said, well, what was it? And I said, I was sexually abused from 4 to 16. So they were able to map it in the brain and how it changed, and working with the frontal lobe. My frontal lobe, is non-functional in some ways, and then the hippocampus, and that's the fight and flight responses. So there was physical evidence of it. Now, mental illness is that unseen disorder. And my parents denied what they did to me, as they all do, and all that sort of stuff. So for me, all of a sudden I was having an external third person valuation, and it freed me. It freed me to just accept my reality as true. And that ability to embrace it, I talk about that extensively and deal with it. I talk about how that gave me the ability to rewrite my future. And these were some of the things that culminated in giving myself permission to graduate from trying to be John 1.0. I no longer was A-type. I was no longer driven like that. I wanted to sit around, write poetry, and smoke a cigar. It was literally poles apart. And the ability to be able to do that and give myself permission to do that was why that scan was so important. The reason I wrote Deal With It was I just finished filming a documentary called Stopping Traffic. It won a whole bunch of awards, and we were traveling around at all the premieres with it. And people kept on asking me why I wasn't crazy. And I have to keep on getting up and talking about some of the lessons. And I thought it would just be helpful for people to do. So, brought a box of cigars and sat in the garage at 115-degree heat in Texas in 6 weeks and wrote it. And it really was the condensation of, 10 years DIY psychology and trying to come to terms with trauma, because there's not a lot of material out there about the impact of trauma, particularly sexual abuse by women on men. There was nothing out there. There's no support groups. This is 15 years ago. There's no support groups, no books, no references. So I didn't have anything. So that's why I wrote Deal With It. And it really is, Deal With It is just about overcoming trauma. It's been a massive adoption in the military and law enforcement. So it's been very well received, which I'm very grateful for.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, trauma, unfortunately, it's the great human equalizer, that none of us get to live our lives without being exposed to something. Your story is, particularly acute and harsh, but it also represents what healing looks like, or what it can look like when we allow ourselves to really kind of lean into our lives and recognize, this is all true. This happened. And when you stop fighting yourself, you start living your life. So it's a really remarkable story. But John, I'm just so grateful that you came on today. And it's surprising because I wasn't, we didn't have a long conversation before we started. And, here you are, perfectly timed for this conversation. This one is from Peter, and he says, the show is amazing. What a story. Very brave to share all of this. I cannot imagine people going through this in their life. Thank you to both of you for the help. Merry Christmas, and may 2020 be better for you and all of us in this world. And yes, I say yes to that, Peter. Yes, I'm going with that.
Yes.
And exactly. Patty says, hello, thank you for this show today. This is so sad what Dr. King and others have and are going through. What horrendous situations in life. I'm so sorry and saddened to hear these things. And thank you for discussing these issues. You're so brave. God bless you. You know what, John, that it occurs to me that, your tragedy and trauma, from the way you describe it, is also your gift.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I wrote a meme, and, people ask me what my doctorate's in, and I say turning shit into fertilizer. And it really is that. I just have a resilience, and I'm gifted. My therapist gave me that gift. She said, you're the most resilient person you've ever met. At that point, because I never called myself a victim, I refused to associate myself with the words. I experienced childhood sexual abuse and recall. I was not a victim of it. When she gave me that gift of that single word, resilience, that's who I was. From that moment on, I was resilient. And whenever I thought about myself, whenever I had a bad day or a downer, I was resilient. John 2.0 is resilient. And I think the ability to be able to hang on to something like that, it changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you've now conceptualized yourself in an absolutely new way.
Yeah.
You know, it actually, this whole story is also making me think about kindness, which is another piece of what I said we were going to talk about today. And you know, it's interesting because, okay, you're getting obviously kindness from this therapist, from Melissa, and also from yourself. But you know, this whole thing about how kindness needs to be part of the solution, you know, and that it can actually make a huge difference. For example, if the staff at this clinic that you went to might have been able to hear that you have PTSD and respond with kindness, how differently things may have unfolded. And, you know, a lot about, you know, dealing, you know, with trauma, you know, when you're facing other people who are struggling, you know, they may be behaving in a way that you don't understand. And when we're able to respond from a place of like appreciation, valuing another human being's suffering, recognizing that, you know, this is a natural condition, like we're all suffering, that's a natural condition, it's true. It doesn't have to, you know, mark our life in terms of, you know, yeah, I'm all a bundle of suffering, but you know, we can actually recognize this in other people, like the suffering of those medical professionals who just seem to be frozen and incapable of responding and seeing you accurately in the moment. Yeah. But I like this quote by Dr. Richie Davidson, who says, kindness is teachable. It's kind of like weight training. We found that people can actually build up their compassion muscle and respond to others suffering with care and a desire to help. Davidson is at the University of Wisconsin, and there's a lot of research on kindness.
Yeah, his work is wonderful. It really helped me early on with Facebook.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. Okay. So you understand where I'm coming from with this. Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of work on this. In 2010, Harvard Business School did a survey of happiness in 136 countries, and they found that people who are altruistic, in this case, people who are generous financially, such as, you know, making charitable donations, these were the happiest people. So, you know, whatever the driver is, it's not that they're giving money or support that makes them happy. They're happy and they are giving and generous.
So, you know, here's a thought for you folks, because the moment they hear about, and I actually spent a lot of time and deal with it, unpacking these two particular writers and studies, because I was having a challenge, because I was absolutely stinking miserable and didn't like anybody, mainly because I didn't like myself. So I came up with the understanding that people have three things to give: their time, their talent, and their treasure. And we sow what we have in order to reap what we can't buy. So the things that we really want to reap, we can't put a price tag on them, but we sow what we have. So if I've got money to sow, I can sow money and I'll reap it back in another area. But if I've got time or talent and I find a way to give, even if that giving is a word, it's a hug, it's an action, it's gracefully giving someone my car park because they seem to urgently need it more than I do. Sure, there you go, have it. Now, mind you, I might flick them off and tell them to go, you know, whatever. There's also that possibility. But on a good day, that's not going to be the way it is. So I hope your listeners don't think there's no halo in this. The only halo in my life is the one I strangle myself with occasionally. But that thought of, we're not limited, as you said so wonderfully, and it's not about money. It's about the attitude and the action that sits behind it. Be that time or be that talent or be that a gift card or whatever it is. It's that whole process of giving beyond yourself to someone that you can't reap a benefit from. And we'll reap it in another area of our life.
Yeah. It's so true. And, you know, one of the ways in which people, you know, gain, and this goes back to the research, So there was one study where they reported that when people were giving, when they were kind, they would feel stronger and more energetic after helping others, and that they were also feeling calmer, less depressed, and had an increased sense of self-worth. So the kind of thing you get back may not be what you expect. It might be endorphins, like the natural painkiller. It might be a sense that you're less stressed, because when you're kind, there's some studies that suggest that you have less cortisol running in your body. That's the stress hormone. So things start to settle down. You're less anxious when you're generous. Like it's just an amazing thing. When you are kind to others, it frees up energy and it gives you the sense of being more at peace with inside of yourself. So boy, the rewards are quite amazing. We only have a few minutes. Believe it or not, the hour goes very fast. I want to read through a couple more of these emails, John, because they relate to you, and people are very, very grateful that you are here, as I am. This one is from Alice, and she says, thank you, John 2.0, genius. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You are an inspiration. Thank you for the Christmas gift for me. I think that's you. That's so sweet. This is from Lisa. She says, I wanted to say how inspirational your guest is today, and how touched I am by his story, and how he's placed a bigger glimmer of not just hope, but almost like a destination in my mind, by the way he has been living, and especially dealing with triggers and big emotions that he faces. This is a really beautiful comment. Just let me read the rest. It's the print is a bit small on my screen. I also love what he says about being seen. I can relate to that enormously. I've thought so much about attitude and the choice to be positive and grateful. I call it living your life with your cup either half full or half empty. I know that despite my own personal trauma, I do live and see my life through the lens of a cup more often half full. But I really believe that many people who live through the lens of the cup half empty are not aware, and it is not a choice for them. It is something automatic and all-pervading. Thanks again for the radio show and for these conversations. Actually, even hearing others speak of situations they've been through makes it feel as though a part of you has been seen, even if you didn't do the talking. Much appreciated as always. That's wonderful. Oh, this really relates so much to our conversation today, John. I think what you've done today in this show has actually been a gift for a lot of people.
I'm glad it could help, Anne. And a gift to your audience. If they want the book and they go to the website, when they check out, if they type in S2S, S, the number 2 and S, it'll give them a 20% discount. And it's my way I can cover the cost of shipping for them wherever they are in the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that's wonderful. So we'll make sure that people get a little link to that as well. Maybe you can send me the link back channel, and I'll send it out to the links that we have. This is another one from Alan, and he says, this is to thank you for your radio shows in 2020. I would like to express my deep gratitude for all your efforts to help the community. I really appreciate it. Wish you and your team safe and happy holidays. Warmest regards, Alan. I guess what I really want to finish with is by wishing you and Melissa a beautiful, warm, healthy, and happy holiday season and New Year. I think it's quite beautiful that you came on today, John, and I'm super grateful that you were able to share your story with us. It's a powerful one, and it really gives us a sense of what's important in this moment. I hope your health continues to strengthen.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll work out.
Yes, I suspect it will. So I want to just thank everybody for a really beautiful year, talking with all of you has been a true joy. I know that right now we're around 2,500 to 3,000 live listeners for each radio show. And to each of you, I just want to really thank you so much for being interested in this conversation. I do think it's important that we all have a way of being seen and heard, and I do plan to continue with these shows into the new year. If you feel that you want to support the work of Trauma Practice, that's a charity, please do that. And wishing you all a gentle day.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowsky, right here on Reality Radio 101.